Jackie Powell, we'll start with you. Go ahead.
So this is a question for Elizabeth. So obviously y'all had a lot of adversity that you dealt with, and I'm really curious as to how the team culture that you all have established sort of helped fuel that run that you guys were able to have at the end of the season. And to follow up, what do you believe are the building blocks that have defined your culture?
Wow. Starting off with the tough questions.
I apologize.
No, it's okay. I think, one, being able to have tough conversations as a team. Obviously the stuff that happened with our owner and combined with all the social justice work we wanted to do in the bubble, that forced us to really have to talk and evaluate, what our values are. And so having those conversations off the court, and then combined with, honestly, just learning each other on the court. We didn't really have a lot of practice time, so a lot of it was kind of on the fly or in film or just in huddles, different things like that. So I think that's kind of how we started to establish our culture. And I think building on to next season and what that looks like, I think we know we have players that can score day in and day out. And so it's going to be, what does our defensive identity look like, and kind of building on that. And I think as the season went on, we started to kind of figure that out. And Coach liked to use the word synergy on defense. And I feel like that was the word, because once we kind of understood each other in that sense, that's when our defense picked up. And I think that'll be a big stepping stone for the next seasons.
Thank you.
And for those just joining, go ahead and raise your hand in the chat and I'll call on you. Bailey Johnson, go ahead.
This is for Elizabeth as well. I'm just wondering how you would overall evaluate the experience in the bubble and everything that's gone down in the last couple of months.
I thought the bubble was fine. I think when you come into a season like this, you really don't know what to expect. And I think besides some initial woes and some logistical issues that we had, we made it work. And I think we obviously knew this season was a sacrifice, and we knew things weren't going to be perfect and we were going to be away from our families. But we already kind of understood that. But as far as the other stuff and the practice and the games and the broadcast courts and all that stuff, I think it was fine. And I think I'm really happy that I was able to participate in it and be part of it. And, there were some really cool things having all the other teams around. And I don't know, I just think despite what's happening in the world, I think it went pretty well.
I'll go ahead and throw that same question to Nikki. Nikki, if you can just talk about the bubble experience now that you're out, looking back at it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the beauty of it, if there was one thing that was consistent while it wasn't perfect, we were probably safer there than we would have been anywhere in the world. The daily testing, when we went into it, we thought the testing would taper. We would go from daily testing to maybe twice a week testing as the season went along. And I don't know what it was, 72 straight days of testing. There certainly were complications. I think different players handled it differently. Some handled it better than others. But ultimately, the league accomplished what it set out to do. Now they've got a few weeks left to make sure that it comes to fruition and a champion is named. But ultimately, the goal was to play basketball, to play it in a safe environment. And we did that. Ultimately coaches are always going to get judged on wins and losses. And I wish that part of it had gone a little differently. I think we were good enough to be playing tonight with a chance to go to the semi. So, But as far as what the experience, it wasn't ideal. We all miss family. We all miss friends. We all miss that feeling of having a crowd, kind of willing you on. But I think we also were all in the same situation, and you almost got used to not playing in front of a crowd. You got used to what it felt like. And you really didn't think about it once the ball was tipped up, I don't think.
Bailey Johnson, back to you.
Nikki, I know you talked about this the other night after the last game, but I'm just wondering, after a couple of days to reflect on everything in the last couple of months, how you evaluate the growth of the team and your time there.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this before. Like, I'm not one to make excuses, but I think we were dealt one of the most difficult hands in the bubble, and there were other teams that lost great players to opt out for a variety of reasons, but most of them knew that going in. I think the tough part for us wasn't necessarily overcoming, Tiffany and Renee opting out. It was, the dealing with COVID in the bubble and dealing with players coming late. And when your only practice time is training camp, not having 3 players that we thought were going to play key roles on our team, and then trying to figure out how to integrate people and integrate them without practice time and have them learn playbooks and things like that. And so, we talked early about defensive synergy. Elizabeth talked about that. And, ultimately halfway through the season, we were on pace to be the worst defensive team in the history of the WNBA in 24 years. And it felt like that at times, and we didn't have bad defensive players, but we didn't have any practice time together. And ultimately, when all was said and done, and I wouldn't say all of a sudden we became a defensive juggernaut, but we were so deeply in a bad place statistically defensively that the fact that we climbed not only out of the worst in WNBA history, but we ended up 10th in defensive rating in the WNBA. So Dallas and Indiana finished with worst defensive rating. So, ultimately we don't take the title of worst defensive team in the history of the WNBA or even the history of the bubble. And so I thought we made progress in that area. I thought the players started to learn each other better. It doesn't mean that as a staff, we haven't already met and spent an entire day talking about, what do we have to do with this team to make us better defensively? How do we help Kennedy be better defensively? How do we help Courtney be better defensively? How do we help, us in a team setting be better defensively? So, we're all very much in that mode already. So, because like Elizabeth said, we know we've got players that can score the basketball. We were worried losing Tiffany. How are we going to get to 85 points? I think we could consistently get to 85 points night in and night out. So, I think it's the other side of the ball that we have to continue to get better on.
Before I go to the next question, Shakina Strickland is with us now. So if you have a question for her, please raise your hand and I'll call on you. But Jackie Powell, will go to you.
Hey, this is for Coach Nikki Collen. I don't know if you heard the question I asked Elizabeth, but I'd like to pose it to you as well. And from your perspective, I'm curious as to how the team culture that you established really helped fuel the run that you all had at the end of the season.
I think this was a unique situation. I think that, it was a unique situation for every team dealing with the pandemic, dealing with we got the bonus of having ownership issues that stung a little deeper. And I think my job in that scenario was to really stand side by side with these guys and not necessarily be the leader in front, but to be more of a servant leader. So I think it started with them having a voice. And I think it was a season that was really about the players' voices, not just our team, but all teams and coaches figuring out how to help these guys elevate their voices if we had platforms to do so. So, I think for us, 10 new players, learning each other's games and learning each other's personalities. There were some of the most heated timeouts I've ever been a part of in coaching, because I think players learning how to communicate with one another that didn't know each other. And we have players with different dispositions and different ways of communicating and, learning kind of what's okay and how to say things. I mean, I think that's where our team had to grow, had to learn how to reel certain personalities in and let other personalities shine and figure out that ultimately it was, we were trying to get to the same goal, which was to win basketball games, as opposed to, someone's voice being louder than another's, but I think it took, that's just something that had to happen in games, so that because we didn't have practice time, I do feel like these guys, standing together, in terms of standing up to, what Kelly did say about Black Lives Matter and the organization versus the movement, or whatever her reasoning was, I think that started a communication dialogue with them. So there's that side, but there's just, basketball is still a sport that gets played between the lines. So I think as much of our culture had to grow, like on the court, how they communicated themselves in a huddle, how they communicated with each other, in a timeout, things like that, had to grow and get better, and to get them going in the right direction all the time.
Bailey Johnson, back to you.
I have a couple questions for Shekinah. First of all, I'm just wondering overall how the bubble experience was and sort of your takeaways now that you've been out for a couple of days.
It was tough. It was some different experience. It's different not having fans, not having family and support there, and just being all in one location, having to see everybody from different teams to referees. It was tough. It was something different. It was an experience that me personally, I really didn't like. But it's just how things was.
And then I think you mentioned you'd been dealing with some shoulder things. I'm just wondering how you're feeling and how that's doing.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
You mentioned you were dealing with a little shoulder issue. I'm just wondering how that's feeling and how you're doing.
It was more pain. I wasn't getting my full extension. I don't think when I try to fully extend my arm, it was always some pain, and that was mostly what it is. I think we was really trying to do a lot more, getting it loosened, and so I can get that full motion when I shoot. That's something that is just something still I got to keep working on.
Thanks.
Alec McQuaid, go ahead.
Hey, this is for Nikki. Just to kind of build off what you were talking about a minute ago, how do you think dealing with all of that stuff, like the social justice issues, the coronavirus, how do you think that's going to change your coaching style moving forward? And then when you talked about being a leader out in front for your players, especially when it came to the ownership issues, how do you think that may affect kind of your relationship with the ownership group moving forward? And do you anticipate any issues with that?
I don't know that. I think that the pandemic may change everything for everybody. I don't know that it's a basketball coach situation. I think it's a, where are we going to be at in 2021? Will we have a vaccine? Is there a new normal? What does that look like? What does that feel like? Are we going to be wearing masks around for the foreseeable future? I think there's a lot of questions that, as someone with an engineering degree and not a medical degree, I'm just going to try to be as educated as I can and take care of my family when it comes to that. I think that, how I coach, I'm not sure it's as affected. I think I read Pitino used to say that, some teams are more player led, some teams are more coach led. The best teams have a great combination of great player leadership with a sprinkling of coaching leadership. But sometimes there are times when coaches have to take on more of a leadership perspective. I think Elizabeth did an incredible job of, really going outside her comfort zone. I think she's smart. I think she's articulate. I think that she's very educated in all areas when it comes to how she communicates with people. But I think being loud and being vocal is something that pushes her outside of her comfort zone. And I asked her to do that. And I thought at times, she always did it off the court and was kind of growing in that leadership on the court in terms of of what that looks and sounds like. So I think that would be, my answer in terms of how does it, I'm not sure it changes how I coach. I am who I am. I'm always trying to get better. I'm always trying to get better X's and O's. I'm always trying to get better at how I communicate and learning to communicate with this team. And with 10 new players, it's figuring out, what every player needs. And at the same time, forcing growth in them that while, there are certain ways they like to be communicated with, there's a reality at this level. There's a professionalism to doing things the right way, regardless of whether you like what's being said to you or not, and it's kind of finding that fine line. I mean, Elizabeth probably can attest to the fact that I probably swore more this summer than I've ever sworn in like my WNBA career as a head coach, assistant coach, or probably a player, because it was about kind of finding ways to keep them motivated when we weren't playing well, of challenging them. A lot of it was just challenge, like a pride thing. You don't have, you had to look inside this summer. You had to look at the guy next to you and look at the guy on your right and left and have the pride to keep competing, because you didn't have 10 people cheering for you. You didn't have 100. You didn't have 10,000 people cheering for you or against you. So you had to internalize, a lot of it, this summer. So, I think that's my best, answer to that.
And then is it, what do you just think about your relationship with the ownership group moving forward and after being a leader for the players, how that might be affected?
Yeah, I think that they knew I was put in a tough position. I think this is, say politics are in or out of sports. The reality is politics are in sports, and you can't say you want them out of sports. And then at the same time, they're going to promote, Trump helping the Big Ten play, so you have politics involved in sports. I have to believe that my ownership group understood that I was in a situation where I was working and living alongside our players. And this wasn't a situation where it was about me sharing my political views. It was about me allowing them to share theirs, and they have that right. And so, I haven't heard any negative feedback on it. I know they hired me to do a job, and that my goal was to do my job. And so, I can't tell you that before or after this it's not I think what people don't understand is an ownership group. It wasn't like I was best friends with them before. I work for them. They support me. I ask for things that we need to be successful. That's what they want to hear. They just want to hear the whys and the hows. And so, I probably won't be at any rallies. I wasn't in any rallies before, and I won't be any rallies now. When it comes to a political thing, I understand that I have to walk the line in that scenario when it comes to my personal philosophies.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Danny Thompson, we'll go to you.
Coach Danny Thompson with the 3-point conversion. With the way the season ended up for you, how proud of you of this group after starting off with such a slow start and getting to the point where you were literally 1 to 2 plays or games away from making the playoffs after going through what this team has gone through? And the second part of the question is, how excited are you to have this group come back and then potentially also get back Tip and also get Renee back next season to grow this thing going forward?
Yeah, super proud of this group. The good part is I can say that with less emotion than I did, in the post game the other day. I think this team endured probably more than any other team in the bubble. It was different, and other teams faced injuries. Other teams faced opt-outs. I don't want to suggest anybody had it easy, but I think the off-court stuff, the direct effect of COVID and how it affected our team in this situation. I think, above and beyond that, we finished 4-2 and we're playing a game, the last game where, one team's playing for the playoffs and the other team's just playing for spoiler. And kind of the adrenaline of that. It's like we played in 11 one-possession games, and we were pretty good in those games. Like, so I think that it wasn't just the wins and losses. It was that other than a couple games where we got blown out, we weren't good in the second game against Vegas. We weren't good in the second game against Seattle. But I think other than that, win or lose, we were in 11 one-possession games. Like, we were competing. I think nobody wanted to play us at the end of the season. And I coaches will tell you that, and sometimes they just say it. I actually believed it. I think we were hard to guard. I think we got better defensively. I like the fact that we don't have to reinvent ourselves this offseason. We have to get better. We have to add pieces that are going to fill some holes. But we obviously revamped the roster entirely in 2020. And so, being able to change a couple pieces and add a couple pieces and have players back, I think goes a long ways towards, you can kind of build off how you finished, and hopefully in a normal scenario where you can have a real training camp, regardless of whether you have having a few players arrive late from Europe is going to feel like a piece of cake compared to 2020. So, I think that's what you do. I mean, now we know, simple takeaways to me, I've said before from this season are, when we drafted Kennedy Carter, we knew she was super talented, but her game translated. And now it's a matter of getting her to grow up, and be consistent and play both ends of the floor all the time. But we know what we have in her now. The pickup of Benijah, a player that wants to be back in Atlanta, was huge for us and huge in our growth, and adding a player that plays both ends. And so in the midst of some difficult times, we also, found some things out about ourselves that we can build on going forward. And so, I think that's what I'm excited for, is being able to fine tune rather than kind of start over, which I felt like was our goal of 20, the end of the 19 season. It was like, we've got to become a better shooting team. We've got to be a better offensive team. And we did that. Now we've got to build off that and be a better team at both ends of the floor and be a playoff team.
Kevin Taylor, go ahead.
All right. Hi, Coach. My question to you is, of course, this was a season of adversity, and I've seen you in the past get very personal, have a personal relationship with your players. Now, considering all that was going on, how personally are you invested now in this team from the beginning of the season, during the season, and now at the end of the season? Are you with the ladies after spending so much time with them on a personal level?
Yeah, I mean, I think on a personal level, I don't know that my goal is to always, like, in some ways, not stick my face in their business when they're not on the court very often. And so even though we were in a bubble, they still needed their space. I didn't make Elizabeth come eat breakfast with me or, do things like that, because I think they're all adults. They all need their time. But, I'm always going to invest in them personally. I mean, I knew Strick before we signed her. I got to know Elizabeth when I got the job, and, she became my captain this year. So there was a lot of conversations about, whether it was, can we practice, or are we going to have a team meal and watch film? I mean, I think I think relationship building is all a part of, being a good coach and being a good team. And I'm not always great at it. I think there are times when, I can be more involved but you're always trying at this level to weigh involvement versus space. And, certainly it's easier to do, when we're traveling and things like that. But you also have the ability when you're traveling to grab them in an airport when people are sitting around and not have to force things. So, I love all these guys. I tell them that, and I do, and I care about them on and off the court, and I care about where they go in the off season, and I care about their families, and I care about their girlfriends and boyfriends and fiancés and, whatever they turn out to be. You know, I want them to know that I care about them. And I think most of them do know that. They probably question it at times if they don't like, you know, my substitution patterns. But I think at the end of the day, they know they care about them.
Dan Goldberger, go ahead.
Coach, I want to talk a little bit about the draft lottery. So what are you going to bring for good luck this year to maybe?
Okay, well, I'm gonna roll with, so I got a baby from the king cake in the bubble. It was actually probably, I would have to say, the best food night in the bubble, when they did kind of crab legs and hush puppies, and I mean, they even had catfish, you know, like there was so much food. But ultimately, I had to explain to some of my staff that did not know what a king baby was, or what a baby was in a king cake. But I got it, and that stayed in my pocket down the stretch. So I think we went 4-2 with that king baby in my pocket. So we're gonna have to hope that gives us good luck.
Thanks.
Kevin Taylor, we'll go back to you.
Okay, Coach, it's going to be a two-part question here. First, now, what would you like to see improving, of course, as we go into the off season now, since you did say you went 4-2 to end the season, and some improvements that the team would like to make going into the off season, and what are your plans during the off season as well?
You know, I'm going to start with the second part. I don't know what my plans for the off season are. You know, in fact, a couple of the top draft prospects are international kids. And right now, Americans can't travel to the countries they're playing in. So, you know, I think, you know, the college basketball season be announced that it's going to start November 25th. Don't know what that looks like as far as scouting. I mean, scouting is a big part of our off season. You know, I already was a cheer mom last night. I drop off and pick up responsibility for my daughter's cheer. I was booking a hotel for the New Year's in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania for a 7-on-7 indoor lacrosse tournament for my youngest. So I end up very much in mom mode in the off season. I know I'm semi-present, but very unpresent during the WNBA season. So, you know, a lot of the off season is about me being a mom to a couple 15-year-olds and a 13-year-old. So that's first and foremost, and we'll probably get away and take a vacation if we're allowed to. Somewhere. Maybe we can't leave the country like we normally would, but you know, we'll make it work. And then what do we want to improve on? I mean, I think a lot of it is, you know, we talked as a staff on Tuesday when we got back about how we make all our returnees, like what one or two things, you know, do I have to help them understand, you know, to make them better players, whether it's offensively, defensively, whether it's communication, whether it's, you know, growth areas for each player. We kind of talked about that, and then combine that, and we talk about, you know, what do we need at this point, you know, and I think it's no small mystery that, you know, I moved Strick down to the 4 at the end of the season because nobody was guarding our 4s on the perimeter. They weren't guarding Glory, and they weren't guarding Monique unless they were, you know, near the rim. And so we've got to address, you know, what do we do for a stretch 4? And there's not a lot of stretch 4s in the draft. So, you know, a big part of off-season plans will be to, you know, really make sure that we have, you know, a more versatile stretch 4 so that there's space for Elizabeth to roll and play. So there's space for Kennedy and Tip to drive into. And, you know, because, you know, even though Strick may not have had her greatest shooting season of her career, the reality it was we were a better offensive team because people didn't leave her. Like there's a respect there to her shooting ability where it made everything cleaner. I mean, even when she was in at the 4, it made it easier for Elizabeth to roll with a clean lane. So, you know, we've got to make sure that's addressed. That's our biggest thing we have to have addressed, you know, that and probably backup point guard, you know, which you saw was a little problematic for us when Kennedy went down. But between Renee and Maite being suspended, I feel like that's an easier solve than stretch 4.
And Danny Thompson, will go to you for the last question.
Coach, as kind of piggyback off the last question, with going into the offseason, like I said, you still have players who are returning that were not available with the team this season. How does those returning players affect in the process when it comes to international scouting or college scouting when it comes to the potential draft? And what is your idea for Kalani going forward with her and her development?
Okay, I'll always start with the last question first because it's right there. So in Kalani's case, Kalani's got to get in shape. It's that simple. There's not a whole lot else to say. And in shape, Kalani would be incredibly impactful for us. So, you know, in the off season, she's got to get to work in that area and come back fit and ready to go because, you know, we believed enough in her that we traded 2 players to get her. I still believe her future is really bright, but it's going to start and end, you know, kind of with her being able to play at the pace that this league demands, side to side, front and back, however it is. So, you know, with the players returning, the amazing thing is I was looking at the list of players that are reserved for us. I'm not even sure we're going to keep them all on the reserve list because we've got so many. It's like we've got like 20 players under contract right now. So we won't even be allowed to have that many, quite frankly, going into the new year. So we'll have to figure out, you know, what that means, like who ends up being a training camp contract, who ends up. But I mean, obviously Tiffany Hayes is still under contract and has another year on her contract. So, you know, we certainly anticipate her being back and helping us. You know, Renee is a reserve player because she was in the last year and opted out of her contract. She's reserved, but has to be re-signed. You know, Maite is playing with the top team in Spain right now. And probably had we had a real training camp, Maite would have made the team, you know, last year. But I mean, between Thornton and Pivic and our international players and, you know, we've got a lot of players and most of them probably will not be on our roster next year. So, you know, just kind of got to sort through the weeds on that. We've already identified both the unrestricted free agents as well as possible trade type players that we might target for needs that we have. So, you know, that just plays out over time. I mean, quite frankly, and there's no set plan for that other than we know what areas we need to be better in. You know, so excited that, you know, Benijah told me she wants to come back to Atlanta. And so, you know, she'll be a priority in re-signing, but everybody else is under contract right now. So we're excited about that.
I lied. We actually have one more question here. Coach, can you talk about the backcourt of Courtney and Kennedy, kind of how they grew together throughout the season, maybe how you see their role in the team moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we didn't have Courtney at the beginning, and then we were, you know, Courtney was coming off the bench, and a lot of times because, you know, Kennedy always had to come out of the game about 5 minutes in, and a lot of times from foul trouble early in the season. They didn't really get to play together very much the first half of the season between Courtney being late and then Courtney subbing in for Kennedy and, you know, then Kennedy getting hurt. You know, they really didn't start to kind of develop together until Kennedy came back, I think, from injury. And not only was, you know, did Kennedy kind of have to get back in the flow of things then, you know, it really wasn't, if you watch Courtney Williams in the finals last year and you saw her elevation on jump shots, I really didn't feel like it was until the Indiana game, the second Indiana game this season, where I saw Courtney get some lift on her jump shot. Like, I just think the combination of the you know, the isolation, the spring and not playing, and then COVID and being stuck in a hotel room for about 3 weeks before she could come back. Like, I just felt like we didn't get the Courtney with some bounce, you know, that I think we got down the stretch. So, you know, I think together, you know, they're both players that can get a jump shot. You know, I think that as Kennedy gets better, she's not going to be a facilitating or a scoring point guard. She's going to be both, you know, but I think at times, you know, you saw her get 26, but 1 assist, you know, and Kennedy, you know, is capable of creating more. And I think when she gets hot, she goes to her jump shot And, sometimes that's good. And sometimes, I think it's getting that feel of, who needs a shot, being willing to turn down a shot to get a teammate a shot so that, you have great synergy and you have players that are cutting and screening because they know they're going to get a touch as well. So, I think they're both players that can go get their own shot. I think they're exciting to watch. So hopefully, from an efficiency perspective, they continue to get better. And we continue to see like better and better balance from them in terms of both scoring and, kind of facilitating for others.
All right. Thank you all so much.